The New York Islanders managed to outlast the Montreal Canadiens in a marathon shootout, but Anthony Duclair is injured. We'll talk about the fallout from that, some moves the team is making as a result, and a whole lot more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lots to discuss on today's show. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR-VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So join me for some instant insight and analysis. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. The Islanders managed a win at home Saturday against the Montreal Canadiens. It wasn't pretty. We will get to the game and break it all down. But the big news coming out of this game was that Anthony Duclair left mid-game with a lower body injury, did not return, needed some help to leave the ice after the play. And obviously, look, we know the Islanders couldn't make a lot of moves this offseason without trading somebody away. Lou Lamoriello ended up opting not to do that, so he made do with the limited cap space he had left, and the two moves he made were signing KHL scorer Maxim Siplikov and then signing Anthony Duclair as a free agent. Well, here we are, just 5 games into the season, and already Duclair is banged up. Now, the good news is, first of all, let's before we get to the good news or the bad news, it looks like at this point that this is not an injury that is so serious that it will require Duclair to have a stint on LTIR. If he did go on LTIR, he'd have to miss a minimum of 10 games, and we're talking about a whole different scenario. Now, how do I know that Duclair is likely not headed to LTIR right now? Because after the game Saturday, the New York Islanders Sunday announced that Julien Gauthier was being placed on waivers, which means they are sending Gauthier, if he clears waivers, and we will know by 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon, today, whether or not he cleared waivers, but basically they are sending him down to the minors in order to bring up somebody to replace Duclair in the lineup. So obviously you don't want to have just 12 forwards on the active roster. And we know that, Gauthier, he played in his first game on Saturday. I can't say he stood out. I can't say he made a big impression. Now, again, your first game of the year, you're playing on the fourth line. But, for Gauthier, he was essentially on the ice for a little more than, 7 minutes? 7 minutes, 42 seconds, had 2 hits, did not register a shot on goal, did not figure in the scoring. An unremarkable game. And I think it's even more unremarkable when you consider that Anthony Duclair left the game early. So you would have thought, okay, there would be some more opportunities for, if Patrick Waugh had some confidence in Julien Gauthier, hey, let him play a little bit on, even if they move him up to the third line a little bit. But no, they kept him on the fourth line and juggled the lines a little bit afterwards. But bottom line, if Anthony Duclair is going to miss some time, Patrick Waugh does not feel that the answer to that problem is Julien Gauthier. So they place Gauthier on waivers. Either someone's going to claim him, and then the Islanders can bring somebody up, or Gauthier goes down to Bridgeport, and the Islanders have enough cap room to literally call up one player. And let's face it, the Islanders do not have enough cap room to call up just anybody, okay? It's got to be somebody making at or near the league minimum. So they would have just a little bit more than $1 million of cap space if Gauthier does clear waivers, or even if he's claimed. So you can't bring up Pierre Engvall, because Engvall would cost more than that, close to $2 million in cap space. And they would not be able to do anything with that. So who do you bring up? Well, you have Liam Foudy. He was one of the last cuts in training camp. Maybe you bring up Foudy. That is a distinct possibility. But I don't think that's what they're going to do. We have one more clue that we found out on Sunday that tells us what the Islanders are likely thinking and what they are likely trying to do. And that is this. Bridgeport played Hartford on Sunday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon game. In that game, Liam Foudy was on the ice. Pierre Engvall was on the ice. Who did the Islanders sit out? Most likely because they didn't want to risk an injury to this particular player. Well, if you guessed Hudson Fasching, you were right. So Hudson Fasching, I think, is the player that the Islanders are most likely to call up in this circumstance. And here's the thing. Fasching has NHL experience. He knows the system. He played under Waugh, in the second half of last year, played for the Islanders for the last 2 seasons, was injured in training camp, so didn't exactly have a lot of opportunities to make a big impression, ended up getting sent down to the minors. It looks like they are going to go with Fasching. And having Hudson Fasching on the roster gives the team a few options going forward. The most likely option when you're trying to fill out a lineup, you put Hudson Fasching on the fourth line. So you would move Fasching along with Cizikas and McLean. That would be your fourth line. I mean, Fasching did play last year on other lines during the season, but he didn't prove to be all that productive when he did. So rest assured that it is unlikely that Hudson Fasching plays on any line except the fourth. So if Fasching fills in on the fourth, the question then becomes, what do the Islanders do to fill the lineup spot? And that is something we're going to discuss after the break. But, the other thing is this. Clearly, the Islanders do not believe that Anthony Duclair is going on LTIR. Now, he could subsequently, they could find another problem with it. He could be skating and aggravate the injury. There are things that could eventually lead him to LTIR, but right now it doesn't look that way. It looks like it'll be more of a short-term absence because here's the deal. If Duclair was placed on LTIR, they would be able to bring up Pierre Engvall because they would get cap relief for Duclair and his $3.5 million a year salary. And that would allow them to have Engvall's full salary of $3 million or cap hit of $3 million up with the big club. So indications are they don't expect Duclair to be out too long. How will this lineup look if indeed Hudson Fasching is the call-up? We're going to talk about that. We'll break down all of Saturday's game with our hero and go to the game and our key takeaways. And for our Islanders' birthday of the day, we have a checking forward who was with the Islanders in the early 1990s. Let's see if you can guess who that is. All that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of Locked On Islanders will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So if Hudson Fasching is the call-up, the Islanders have a few options. One option would be to move Max Siplikov up to the top line. It is one option. I don't think it's the best option. Why? You got to like the chemistry we've seen early between Brock Nelson, Max Siplikov, and Kyle Palmieri. That has been a positive for this team over the first 5 games. So while Siplikov did get some time on the top line after Duclair was hurt, I don't think that is the most likely outcome. I think he'll see some shifts up there, but I don't think it is the most likely. Now, we also could take a big gamble, and we could move Oliver Wahlstrom, who is almost certainly going to be back in the lineup. You could move Wally onto the top line. The problem with that is that you already have Matthew Barzal, who is not great as far as, being responsible defensively. He does turn the puck over a little more than you would like when he skates with the puck very often, and he's not terrible defensively, but he is not the best defensively either. And having he and Wahlstrom both on the ice on the same line could really put a strain on the Islanders' defense whenever that line is out. But Wahlstrom gives you the opportunity, it gives Wally the opportunity to show what he could do. And, there are some advantages to that as well. So we'll see whether, what Wahlstrom ends up doing. The other option, and this is what I think they are more likely to do, but you place Oliver Wahlstrom on the third line. So you fill in Hudson Fasching, with Kyle McLean and Casey Cizikas. That's your fourth line. Pajot, Lee, and Wahlstrom can be your third line. And that, that isn't a bad trio other than the fact that only one of those players in J.G. Pajot really even has average speed. I mean, Lee is slow. Wally is not the best skater, as we all know. That line could be a little on the slow side. And again, depending on who you're playing against, that could create issues for the New York Islanders defensively. But offensively, Lee can score 20. Wally, you hope, could score 20. Pajot could give you 15 to 20. Might be a way to give the third line a little more offensive juice, even if it does make them slower. And then who do you fill in on the top line? It would have to be Simon Holmstrom. And the reason I think Holmstrom makes more sense on the top line than Wally is this. Even though Simon Holmstrom does not have a lot of confidence offensively right now and has not produced anything 5-on-5 offensively this year, Holmstrom right now in 5 games has 2 assists. One of them was shorthanded, so he has a grand total of 2 assists in 5 games and 2 shots on goal in 5 games. So offensively, he really hasn't shown anything yet this season. And again, small sample size, but he has to show more. But the one thing that Holmstrom can do, he can skate with Matt Barzal, and he is responsible defensively. So if you have Horvat and Holmstrom, who can both be responsible defensively, and you have Horvat and Barzal, who can both put the puck in the net, and maybe you have a guy in Holmstrom who can keep up with Barzy, who can also create room with his speed, I think that gives you maybe a little bit of an inspiration, hopefully, for Holmstrom to try to be a little more offensive-minded while still creating a more balanced lineup. So I would go that route if indeed Fasching is the guy they call up. If for some reason Lou Lamoriello changes his mind and they call up Liam Foudy to play, maybe you put Foudy up on the top line because he has the speed and the offense that the Islanders would need there. But again, why would the Islanders put Foudy in the lineup Sunday for Bridgeport if they thought they were calling him up? Because if he gets hurt against Hartford in an AHL game, he wouldn't be available for the NHL game on Tuesday. So you try to read between the lines and figure it out. It's going to likely be Hudson Fasching. That's the safe call. And, it's not going to be William Dufour or Matthew Maggio or any of the guys that Islander fans tend to prefer to have, those more prospecty guys get an opportunity. It looks like it'll be Hudson Fasching. And then those are the options as far as where do you put Hudson Fasching in this lineup. I think the Islanders will put him on the fourth line, move Wally up to the third line, and Holmstrom up to the top line. But I'll say this, and I'll say it again. Simon Holmstrom is not a first-line player. He is not a top 6 player. And I think it has more to do with his lack of offensive confidence than his lack of offensive pure skill. But if he doesn't have the confidence, it's tough to see him in the top 6 over the long haul. But for a game or 2 or 3, at least having him be your first option because of his speed, because of his responsible defensive play, I think it makes the most sense given the limited choices that the New York Islanders have right now. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We'll take a look back at a thrilling but uneven shootout win over the Montreal Canadiens. We'll talk about that and our Islanders birthday of the day coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And look, this is October. There's so much to bet on. The World Series is coming up soon. College football, pro football in full swing. Islander fans, check out the odds for the Islanders on Tuesday when they play their next game against the Detroit Red Wings at home. You know, it'll be interesting to see what the odds are for that one, whether the Islanders can pull off the win and extend their winning streak to 2. Check the odds on FanDuel. Again, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Head to FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Nice win for the Islanders. It wasn't always pretty, but in the end, they got the 2 points. And when I say it wasn't pretty, why wasn't it pretty? Well, let me count the ways. The Islanders' power play, yeah, they scored the first goal of the game on the power play, but they went 1 for 6 and did not look good during many of those other opportunities. Again, the Islanders give up a power play goal, so the penalty kill still struggling. The Islanders had leads of 2-0, 3-2, and couldn't hold them, giving up the tying goal with less than 3 minutes left in regulation. And let's face it, that last goal was a softie. That was the only one out of the 3 that Varley probably should have had, but didn't. So again, you got to be concerned about that. Obviously, the Duclair injury, not encouraging. You don't want to lose one of your top 6 forwards. Hopefully, the early indications are it's not going to be a long-term injury. But again, you give the Islanders credit. They bounced back. They were able to find a way to win the game, and that is something that they really needed to do. It's a game that they should have won, but thankfully they end up doing it. And how refreshing is it from an Islanders standpoint to win a shootout? They don't do it often enough. And a 9-round shootout, I mean, when you get down to it and you have defensemen taking turns on the shootout, that tells you we've been going for a while. 9 rounds in the shootout. And Varlamov was strong in the shootout. I can't say he was outstanding, but he was really good. Got the job done. And the Islanders basically had a chance to, win this game, and they did. The other frustrating thing, the Islanders had a power play in overtime, could not convert. You got to take advantage of those opportunities. But overall, the good news is the Islanders were able to win the game, and they needed it. The bad news was a lot of the same tendencies, the shaky special teams, the giving up the leads, the inconsistent defensive play, all of that still issues for the New York Islanders that they still need to straighten out. And again, not good. Now, another good sign that came out of this game, some depth scoring. Anders Lee getting a goal, so the third line does score. They need that. It was a good goal by Lee, who also had 7 hits to lead the team. So he is embracing more of a physical role for the team, and boy, do the Islanders need that. And again, the big thing that bothers me after this game is just that the Islanders seem too much like the problems that they had last year are very much the problems they have in the first 5 games this year. You were hoping for improvement. 2-1-2, you got points in 4 out of your 5 games. If you're looking at it as the glass half full, that's a good thing. If you're looking at it as the glass is half empty, you're 2 wins and 3 losses in 5 games, and you're just not playing consistent hockey. So, hero of the game, I'm going to go with Noah Dobson for the shootout game winner. And go to the game is going to be special teams. Again, to me, special teams still. Both the power play, which isn't moving the puck enough and isn't creating enough chances. They're not. The thing about the power play that's driving me nuts, and we will talk about it more tomorrow, they don't seem to be going to the goal. They don't seem to be passing with purpose. They're moving the puck around the perimeter, but they're not going to the net, going for rebounds, going for tips, screening the goalie, moving the puck closer for high danger scoring chances. They got to be better, and that has to improve sooner rather than later. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and today is the 57th birthday of former Islanders forward Bill Berg, the St. Catharines, Ontario native, drafted by the Islanders in the 3rd round of the 1986 draft, came up to the Isles for 7 games in 1988-89, became a full-time player in 1990-91, and stayed with the Islanders until midway through the 92-93 season, when he was traded to Toronto, later played for the Rangers and the Senators before hanging up his skates after the 1998-99 season. Berg, more of a checking forward, a two-way guy, played in 546 NHL games, 55 career goals, 122 points, 488 penalty minutes, basically played in 61 playoff games, 3 goals, 7 points, 34 penalty minutes in those. One of his better games as an Islander, January 7th, 1992, at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. Islanders visiting the Red Wings. Steve Weeks, the goalie for the Islanders. Tim Cheveldae in between the pipes for the Red Wings. And after one period, the game is all even at 2 apiece. It stays that way into the 3rd period when our Islanders' birthday of the day, Bill Berg, scores what turns out to be the game-winning goal. Benoit Hogue and Ray Ferraro with the assist. Ferraro scores 2 more goals in a span of 43 seconds later in the 3rd period to ice the win for the Islanders. In the end, the Islanders beat the Red Wings 5-2. Weeks with 35 saves in a game in which the Islanders were outshot 37-21. But for our Islanders birthday of the day, Bill Berg, he scored. He was a +1. He had 2 penalty minutes, and he had his goal on 2 shots. It was the game winner. Benoit Hogue had 4 assists. Ray Ferraro, 4 goals and an assist. But it was Bill Berg who got the game winner, and he is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow on the show. Hopefully we will have an update on the exact status of Anthony Duclair, as the Islanders did not practice Sunday, so Patrick Waugh did not address the media. But hopefully we'll know a little more and look for an update on X, probably during practice in the morning hours. And then we will also preview Tuesday night's home game against the Detroit Red Wings. So make sure you join us for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.